Hi there and welcome to Hyundai Power Products. My name is Adrian and today we're going to look at this petrol-powered water pump. Now this is an 80mm water pump, the HY80. So we're going to open the box, lay the contents on the table so you can see exactly what you get, and then we'll go through some of the assembly and how to use the machine. So I've laid out the contents on the table so you can see everything. First of all, we have the pump unit itself with the petrol engine and the main pump. So there is a bag of various fittings that come with the machine. It does come with this funnel and pipe. Now these are the inlet and outlet pipes. There is a certain way these need to be assembled. We'll show you that. They have a rubber gasket each, two of those, and then the two clamp rings. Moving forward, we have three of these banded clips. Now there's a spark plug spanner here as well, which is useful for changing the spark plug, as you'd imagine. And finally we have the pickup filter to stop rocks or large objects being drawn into the inlet pipe. We'll go through the assembly of all this at a later point, but what I will do is bring your attention to the user manual. Now I do strongly recommend that you read the user manual thoroughly before use. So a common question I get asked is, why isn't it pumping? Typically the problem with that is either down to priming it, or it's down to the way it's assembled with air leaks on the joints. So it's important to get this put together correctly. So on each of these inlets and outlets we have exactly the same fitting. So we'll take our clamp ring, we'll fit the pipe down into there. Now this is the important bit. This rubber gasket goes in here. Okay, I'll just push that down into the bottom. So what happens here is when I tighten up this clamp ring onto the pump, this ring seals up any air gaps between the outlet and the pump itself. Okay, so with that done, I'll just offer it up, line it up clockwise, just a few turns, and tighten that coupling up firmly. We won't have any air leaks there now. So I've done exactly the same here on the inlet, and this is the more important one of the two because it's actually a vacuum. So it's sucking the water up from the pond or the ditch or wherever you're taking it from, and it's important that there's no air leaks on this one. Not as important on the outlet, but certainly very important here. So we've got the pickup filter here, or strainer I should say. That assembles just by pushing it down firmly, and you can see that's the two parts assembled. Now if you were drawing water from a very clean water source, such as an IBC container, something like that, swimming pools, those sorts of things, or just water tanks, then you wouldn't particularly need to use a filter. Always use the filter if it's an unknown source, rocks, stones, mud, anything like that. You would need to use this filter so as to avoid damage to your pump. So as you can see, I've placed one of the clips here just about 25-30mm back from the end of the pipe. So this is the vacuum pipe, this large green pipe, and we need to insert it on here fully. So it's going to be tricky. I mean, this is a one-time job. I'm not going to push it fully on here, but sometimes you'll find it simpler to take the fitting off. Let me just remove that. I'll just take the pipe off there temporarily. So I'll take the fitting off. But it's important that we keep the things in the right order if we're going to take it off. I'll just remove that. So what we need to do is to fit that completely into there. And obviously this gives me a bit more room to push. And you can find, sometimes if we're on a nice surface, something that's not going to damage, and push it down into place. Sometimes a little bit of domestic dishwashing liquid will work as well, just to get it started and push it fully down. So as you can see with this design of clamp, it is designed to go in these grooves, yeah? So it's a spiral groove, so it's not going to fit all the way around. When we tighten up on the bolt here, it'll clamp down on the pipe and prevent any air leaks. But obviously we're going to have this whole assembly right up within a few millimeters of this nut. Not dead tight too, but within a few millimeters, maybe 3 or 4 millimeters clearance. So that would be fitting that pipe, but it is very important that we do this correctly and make sure that we've got no air leaks when we tighten up this clamp. So if we want to fit our filter on the other end of our pipe, obviously this is a lot easier to fit, so we can push it in this end and do up the clamp exactly the same. As long as this area is completely underwater, it's not that necessary to have a perfectly airtight seal, not as important as it is at the pump end. So I'm only using a very short piece of pipe here for demonstration, but it is important that you check your pipe regularly for any holes or piercings. If it's got any air leaks at all, the pump will draw in air rather than water into the pump. And again, that can stop the unit from operating correctly. So with the outlet hose, exactly the same setup. It's far easier to fit. You would put your groove or your clamp here, let it fit roughly into the serrations that are in the body of the pump underneath, and then we can tighten up on the clamp and make sure that that's got a good seal as well. Obviously it's not critical for the operation of the pump, but the better the seal, the less water leaks you'll get at this point. So the next thing we're going to need to do is to put engine oil in the unit. So these units do come with a low oil protection circuit, which will kill the spark if the oil falls too low, or the oil level. So the oil filler is here. Again, just unscrew it anti-clockwise. You see it's got a little dipstick, but for the oil level, what I find is the best way to get it perfect is to put the machine on a flat level surface and gradually pour engine oil into here until the level of the oil reaches the wear point of the hole. So when it gets to a point where the surface level of the oil is just about to trickle back over the edge of this lip, that would be the perfect maximum oil level. Once we've got that level, I can just replace the dipstick, turning it clockwise, and make sure that it's fully tightened back up. If at any time that oil level gets low, the engine won't start. Basically, it replicates what the on-off switch does, and it sends an earth supply to the spark pack, which generates the spark. If there's an earth on it, no spark, engine stops or won't start. So again, while we're on this side of the engine, to start and stop the engine, this simple on-off switch here. So we need to put fuel in the engine. So fuel filler cap, unscrews anti-clockwise. You will see that it does have this fuel strainer. I recommend you leave this in place. Okay, so we can fill it with fresh unleaded petrol, and ideally, if I just show you the inside of this, we want to fill the fuel up to the level of this red float. So when you're looking down in, keep filling, and when you see the fuel just surfacing on that red little indicator line there, that would be a full tank. It's about 20 millimeters below the surface. Once we've filled it full of fuel, we can replace the filler cap and make sure that it's firmly fastened down. Whenever refueling this machine, always make sure that it's obviously in a well ventilated area outside, and never refuel the engine while it's hot. If you've been using it and it runs out of fuel, allow everything to cool down before you refuel the engine. If you spill some, you're going to have a hot exhaust and it's a danger. So allow everything to cool down before you refill the fuel tank. So the carburetor, which is this area here, does have a fuel tap. So once we've filled the fuel tank, towards the outside of the frame here, that's fuel off. So we would need to turn the fuel on by just pushing this lever back across towards the recoil. So that's fuel on. When we stop the engine, or we're transporting the machine, there's a float in here in the float chamber. If you're transporting it with the fuel switch on, you may get an overflow of fuel. So whenever you're not using the machine, just switch that fuel tap back off again. Okay, so we would need to start the machine to turn the fuel on. If it's never been used, we need to wait for a minute or two to allow fuel to run down into the system. And on the top here, we have the choke. So to switch the choke on for a cold start, we need to push this lever across to this side. Once the engine has started, we would then turn the choke off and we'd be running the machine. So we're ready to start our machine. I'll turn the fuel on, I'll turn the choke on, and this lever here is the accelerator lever. So back here would be at idle speed on the engine, and for pumping fully to the outside of the machine, flat out, which is where you'd run it, certainly for priming, getting it going, and for general duty. When we've finished using the machine, we've stopped pumping our water, we push this back down to idle, switch off on the on-off switch, and then finally turn the fuel off. For a warm start, it's possible that we just need to turn the fuel tap on, put this to full speed. We wouldn't need the choke necessarily when it's warm. Some engines do like a little bit of choke even when they're warm, and some would prefer not to have choke. So choke off and make sure our switch is on, pull the recoil and the engine will start. So that's the basic operations of the controls to start and stop the engine. A little bit about the recoil. Sometimes you've got to take a backlash up in a recoil. That's only pulled out a little way and I can feel it's locked. That's actually okay. If I pull it a little more, okay, it's locked. So sometimes if you pull out a little bit, what I would do is get the recoil, pull it out until you feel resistance. That's the perfect spot. Let it back in and then pull the engine to start it. There's no fuel in this engine at present. So once we've got our engine running, we've got our pickup pipe down in our pond with the end fully submerged. We know we've got no leaks and our lay flat hose is connected to the outlet running to wherever we want to discharge the pump. We'll need to prime the pump. So I unscrew this plug on the top of the pump and you're going to need, I would say, 3 litres of water approximately. We need to pour it in the pump with the engine running. Once we poured it in, we put this plug back in. Okay, and you'll hear the pump start to draw vacuum and water will start rushing up the inlet pipe. Air will be coming out, the water will be spitting out of the discharge pipe, only in small quantities because we've only put 3 litres in. But once it's got primed, depending on how high the pump is above your water source, once it's primed, off it'll go and it will discharge at full volume. Again, if you want to stop the pump, once you've discharged or run out of water where you're drawing from, we drop the pump speed back to idle and switch off here on the on-off switch. So if you do have difficulty in getting it to start pumping, it does take a couple of minutes, as I say, depending on the level of head that the pump is drawing up from, but you may need to prime this a couple of times. So typically a bucket of clean water from the source of water. If you have a bucket with a good lip, pour it into the top of the pump. When you hear an engine tone change as if the engine is coming into load, that would be the vacuum coming up. That's the point at which you just pop that plug back in. Okay, so that's just a little tip to get it going. Well, I do hope you found this demonstration and these few little tips useful. For more information on this or any of our other products, visit www.hyundaipowerproducts.co.uk. I've been Adrian and thank you for watching.